Before anybody cared, our Prime Minister was the first Prime Minister around these parts who cared about the human rights, who cared about the HIV/AIDS issue, and so it is very fitting that he should address us this evening. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Dawn, our Madam Master of Ceremonies. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I be permitted to recognize in particular our distinguished Minister of Health, etc., and Mr. Hassel, who is here at the head table, and all those who are our winners for the competition, essay competition, for which we are gathered here to celebrate. I want to emphasize that this evening, it really does give me great pleasure to address you on this very special occasion when we recognize those who have won our essays on human rights competition that was held a few weeks ago. I wish to commend all of the winners and participants. I want to do that in particular for your time, for your effort, and for your contributions towards this very significant movement of making St. Kitts and Nevis a much better place, not only for us here in this blessed country, but for humankind. As citizens of the Federation, we pride ourselves on the many blessings that we have been afforded. And some of these being our land, our heritage, our people, and of course, our freedoms. Oftentimes, as individuals, we take for granted the freedoms which we have earned as a sovereign nation, and also those freedoms as part of the human race. By virtue of being human, there are certain rights and privileges that all are entitled to. And the government of St. Kitts and Nevis embraces this or these through the promotion and protection of human rights as enshrined in our Constitution, which on many occasions is described as the supreme law of our land. This informs unequivocally that, and I want to quote here, every person in St. Christopher and Nevis is entitled to the fundamental rights and freedoms, that is to say, the rights, whatever his race, place of origin, birth, political opinions, color, creed, or sex, but subject to respect for the rights and freedoms of others and for the public interest, end of quote. And so, as signatory to the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis is committed very fully to uphold these considerations by implementing procedures, implementing institutions, and infrastructure that uphold the right and the dignity of every citizen of this proud and blessed federation. In addition to the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, there are several other human rights treaties that we are committed to. And these, of course, are inclusive of, but not limited to, the following. Firstly, the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Secondly, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. This was of 1966 and again emphasized in 2006. Thirdly, Convention on the Rights of the Child. And this in particular fitted quite nicely with our own 29th anniversary of independence celebration, when we said we wanted to concentrate on our children as we see them as part of the strengthening of our families if we were to embrace them. In its commitment to uphold human rights, the government, in fact, endorses the recently commenced human rights campaign, Equality, I should say, for all, making St. Kitts Nevis better. And the objectives of this campaign project were to achieve the following. Firstly, to determine knowledge levels on human rights among the general population and defined communities. Secondly, to ascertain social attitudes on specific human rights issues. And thirdly, to solicit tangible short-term and long-term recommendations with regard to addressing human rights challenges in our federation. And fourthly, to gather information so as to inform and support law reform and other changes. So in other words, really, we are to have a practical application, wherever it is possible, of the recommendations and the ideas which have emanated from the competition which has been pursued and from the consultations which we've had earlier. I'm sure that these would be brought to the attention of the Ministry of Health properly and then brought by the Minister to the Cabinet of Ministers for further discussion and wherever possible brought to the Parliament of our country for legislative support if that becomes necessary. And so these objectives were realized through community and organized group consultations and the essay competition, which brings us here this evening. The essay competition, which offered an opportunity to provide relevant views and recommendations on how, as a country, we can work together to make St. Kitts and Nevis better, received a very positive response, I have been told. Today, the effort started will not culminate here, as there is much more to be done, as I alluded to earlier. There is the commitment to further engage and educate the population on human rights issues through the media and other plausible media. The plethora of recommendations articulated and noted during those consultations, they will be reviewed and they eventually will be considered by the government in an aim to realize the spirit of our Constitution as stipulated in Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is entitled Protection of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms. I want to emphasize that the human rights campaign at this period in our country appears to be also importantly centered around the rights of people who are discriminated against and stigmatized because of chronic disease conditions which are affecting them. I want to emphasize further that the Caribbean community, after maybe, or I should say, something about 3 years ago, became very, very concerned about the tremendous impact of communicable chronic diseases like HIV/AIDS and non-communicable chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, cardiac diseases, cancers, and mental illness. And the tremendous impact I was saying that this would have, or these would have, on the continued development of our people and our country. And the impact is not only seen in terms of the financial impact, but also the impact on the human resources because of the effects of these conditions, the systems, the body systems that we have, but at the same time, driving people away from seeking appropriate recognition of their conditions, firstly, and treatment and management of these conditions because of discrimination and stigmatization. And that is why, therefore, this little exercise today is so critically important. It's important because we hope to unmask, unearth the challenges that we face with regard to some of these conditions, chronic, communicable, and non-communicable, that are affecting our people within the greater body of human rights issues that we do experience. And so I want to emphasize that the government wishes to recognize the support of the UNAIDS and PANCAP for their financial and technical assistance for this particular project. The efforts of such organizations have been critical in the realization of much of the work that is being undertaken. The government would especially like to recognize the contributions of persons like Dr. Edward Green, our UN Special Envoy, Dr. Ernest Messiah, the UNAIDS Director, and Mrs. Juliette Bino Sutherland, the Director of the PANCAP, the Pan-Caribbean Partnership Against HIV/AIDS. And of course, we thank Mr. Hassel, who is here with us from the UNAIDS as well. I want to conclude by emphasizing that we are hopeful that your involvement in the human rights campaign will be extended beyond this essay competition, for which all of you deserve great commendation for your participation. Human rights affect all, and thus concerns us all here in this blessed country, St. Kitts and Nevis. I look forward to reading the final report of the campaign and the proposed recommendations. I also look forward myself to read some of these essays. I myself at one time professed to be a teacher of English in my earlier days. I want to emphasize that the government, along with the Caribbean community, is committed to addressing human rights issues and putting in place the necessary statutes, the policies, and the bodies in order to support human rights in our federation. This will require the support of not just the government, but the private sector, civil society, and all of us as individuals can contribute to promoting and protecting human rights. I am heartened by the interest of our young people in particular in the issue of human rights through their willing participation in this essay contest. We recognize that the true test of the strength of our country's long-lasting commitment to human rights, it lies deep within the manner in which we implement the principles of human rights, involving, therefore, our children at an early age to understand their own basic rights and to appreciate the rights of others. And I emphasize this, not only appreciating their own rights, but also appreciating the rights of others, those who are sitting in the classroom next to them, those who are living in their communities in the next door neighbor's house, those who are all around us in our communities, recognizing as well their own rights, because I believe that this is key to creating a society built on respect for equality, built on democracy and integrity, and of course, liberty. Further understanding of the role of our young people in the whole process is critical in this endeavor, especially at a time when we continue to ask our young people to reorientate their energies and put them into worthwhile endeavors so as to grow and progress our lovely country, St. Kitts and Nevis. In closing, therefore, I wish to commend the organizers and the facilitators, and yet again to congratulate the winners and the participants for their interest in this subject. And I look forward to exploring the application of the recommendations and working with you to promote equality for all as we strive to make St. Kitts and Nevis better for all, not only for this generation, but for generations yet unborn. I thank you.